Okay, so we continue, and later on in the Bible starts telling us about our people, that was called the people of Israel, or the Jewish nation. Okay, and we learned a lot about these people. It's people that God had chosen to represent Him on the earth, to have a connection with Him. Not totally the one we want to have as Christians, that is even better, but they had a sort of relationship and a connection with Him. But one of the things that we want to focus on concerning the gospel that they were doing is that they were doing something quite interesting that we don't hear about a lot in this side of the world, at least, is that they were doing a lot of animal sacrifices. So they were killing animals, okay? And one of the questions, we might ask, and the answer is quite interesting, we might want to ask, why were they doing that? Okay, and so one of the reasons, their reason why they were doing that is because what God had told, those first human beings, when He told them to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay, and we'll come back to that. The reason they were doing this is that they believed that by doing the sacrifices of animals, they were going to pay the prices for their sin. Okay, and we might think, okay, maybe this is something strange or something, but if we try to, think about it, it actually does make sense. Okay, and if we think about the word sin, that some of you might have heard of a lot, or maybe not. Okay, we can think of it, just as a crime. When someone commits a crime today, they have to go to jail, or they have to pay a fine, or some sort of punishment, or some sort of payment needs to be given in order for the justice to be satisfied. And it's the same thing with sin, it's the same thing with wrongdoing. It has a price that needs to be paid. Okay, and the Jewish nation, the way they were paying for those sins, okay, is by doing sacrifices of animals. So now we want to answer the questions, why were they doing that, and what is the logic behind it? Okay, so in order to answer that question, we can start from what God told Adam and Eve when He told them not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So He told them, okay, the day you eat of it, you are going to die. Okay, so what we see here is the price or the cost for sin, meaning for disobeying God, for doing what is not right, for doing what is wrong. There's another place in the Bible that tells us even more directly, what that means, because this part of the Bible tells us that the wages of sin is death. So what it means is that when sin has happened, death needs to happen. It's like a death sentence. It's like a crime that deserves a punishment of death, basically. Okay, so now in order to understand why they were doing this, okay, we can just put this equation, this very simple equation in our minds. Okay, so we have this equation that tells us that, okay, there's sin on one side, what needs to happen is death. Okay, or what the justice requires, what justice says, okay, is that sin, okay, is paid for by death. Okay, now we could ask, in other words, what is death? How could we describe it in another way? What we could say what death is simply someone losing their life, or the loss of a life, or the giving away of a life. Okay, so now we have this equation, that says, okay, that sin is paid for, or sin leads to someone giving their life, or giving their life away in order for the justice to be satisfied, that this sin has been paid for. Okay, now there's an interesting verse in the Bible that tells us that the life of a creature, okay, so that's animals and that's every creature that exists, that the life of a creature is inside their blood. Okay, so I repeat, the Bible says that the life of a creature is inside their blood. Okay, so now if we put this information in our equation, we now have this equation that tells us that sin, okay, is paid for, or what the justice of God requires in order for sin to be paid for is blood. Okay, so this is why they were doing the sacrifices of animals. They were basically giving the blood of those animals as a payment for those sins. Okay, and if we try to think of examples in today's life, if we want to go to a shop or buy something, the currency that we use in this country, for example, is pounds. In other countries is euros. But in that context, we're talking about the way sin is paid for is with blood. And the Bible even says that without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission of sins. So blood is necessary in order for sin to be paid for. So this is why they were doing these sacrifices of animals in order to pay for their sins. Now, there's a little issue. Later, the Bible tells us that actually those sacrifices that they were doing, they were not enough to bring them to a complete freedom, to complete separation from their sins that would wash their sins away forever. So that was not a permanent solution. That was not something that could work forever. Okay, so we are in this issue now, okay, where we have those animals. Okay, this solution is not actually a very perfect solution. It cannot work forever. They had to do that every year. It was not right. Okay, and now we have those people, themselves, they're sinners. So we could say, okay, their blood, is not enough. Or one way to have a look at it, sometimes the way I think of it myself, is if you have a sort of ranking, of everyone that exists. You could say that God is the one at the top, okay? Then a bit lower, you have human beings, and a bit lower again, you have animals. So it's like the price of the blood of these animals is not enough to wash away human beings completely, okay? The same way, those human beings, they were all sinners, so we could say their blood was tainted by sin. Their blood was not pure in order to be that good sacrifice that would pay for the price of the sins of all the people, okay? So we have this picture now where actually the only person, who can do something about the situation, it's not animals, it's not those human beings themselves who are all sinners. The only one who can actually do something here is God himself, okay? But now we have an issue to resolve, is that the Bible tells us that God is a spirit, and a spirit does not have blood. So we'll try to see, okay, how that problem can be solved.